It was nearly midnight. The sidewalk was cold, cracked and empty, except for her. Grace stood barefoot, her swollen feet bleeding through worn-out socks, one hand clutching her belly, the other gripping a bench for balance. Her coat barely closed anymore. At her feet, a leather envelope glimmered under the streetlight. No name, no sound, just silence. And a choice she never expected to make. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. Her fingers trembled from the cold, but it wasn't just the wind that made her shake. Grace Miller, 19, 7 months pregnant, and nowhere to go. A week ago she had a bed, a job, a mother, a future. Now she had nothing but a worn backpack and the constant fear of being seen. When she spotted the envelope, her first thought was survival. Maybe it held money. Maybe it could buy her one warm meal. But as she picked it up and turned it over, something inside her, something that still sounded like her mother's voice, said, "Don't," so she didn't. And in that moment, everything began to change. This is the story of how Grace lost her place in the world and found something no one could have predicted. But that night, standing alone under the city lights, she had no idea what was coming. The smell of lemon cleaner always reminded her of her mother. Back when Grace still lived in their tiny apartment above the elementary school, where Nancy Miller had worked as a cafeteria aide for over 20 years, mornings began with the sound of mops slapping the tiled floor, and her mother humming old gospel songs. "Keep your head down, baby," Nancy used to say. "Be kind, be honest. The rest don't matter." Grace believed her. She had to. That's how she survived walking the halls of Woodmere Academy in a second-hand uniform, while rich kids wore name brands. She worked part-time cleaning classrooms and organizing bookshelves in exchange for tuition. One of the only scholarship students in a school of legacy names and perfect teeth. And then she met Logan Sinclair. He was everything she wasn't. Confident, reckless. He called her Sunshine when no one else even looked her in the eye. He'd sneak into the library during her shifts and make her laugh when she was wiping down desks. Their secret texts turned into whispered talks. Those talks turned into something else. It wasn't love. Not really. But it felt close enough for someone who'd never been seen before. Then came the test, 2 pink lines. Grace stared at it for hours. She didn't cry, not at first, not until she imagined telling her mom. But she never got the chance. Nancy collapsed a week later, during a shift. A silent stroke. Grace found her on the kitchen floor, soup still boiling on the stove. The ambulance came fast, but not fast enough. The next day, Grace told Logan. He blinked, then laughed, then said, "That's not possible." When she told his mother, Principal Sinclair, it was worse, much worse. "You think this will get you money? A name? My son's future?" she spat. "You're just like your mother, cleaning up other people's messes." The next morning, Grace was fired. No letter, no paycheck, no place to stay. All her mother's things were taken by the building manager. No next of kin. Grace stood outside with 2 plastic bags and nowhere to go. She pressed a hand to her belly and whispered, "I'm sorry." That was the day everything began to fall apart. Grace used to dream in recipes. Back when her mother was still alive and the world felt steady, she'd lie awake at night imagining the scent of rosemary chicken, warm bread, or the creamy texture of a butternut squash soup. Her dream was simple: get a culinary degree, open a small cafe, and name it Nancy's Table. A place where tired workers and lonely kids could feel full, even if just for one meal. It wasn't grand, but it was hers. And for a while, it even felt possible. At Woodmere Academy, between cleaning classrooms and studying in secret, Grace began to experiment. A kind librarian let her borrow cookbooks. Sometimes she'd bring homemade scones wrapped in napkins and share them quietly with Logan in the back courtyard. "You should open a bakery," he said once, mouth full, eyes soft. "I'd go there every day." She smiled, letting herself believe him. Then came the news of the pregnancy and the silence that followed. After Principal Sinclair fired her, Grace tried to hold it together. She thought maybe, just maybe, Logan would stand up for her. Say something, offer help, but days passed. No message, no knock on the door, no apology. Then, the door wasn't there anymore either. When the building manager tossed her out, no rent, no mother, no rights. She ended up at the back of a city shelter. It was full that night. She spent the evening sitting near the emergency room of a public hospital, pretending to wait for someone. She wasn't the only one pretending. Over the next few weeks, Grace drifted. Train stations, church basements, a bench under a freeway that reeked of smoke and despair. She clutched her belly like a secret, avoided mirrors, and ate whatever strangers offered, if they offered anything at all. At a fast food place downtown, she tried to apply for a job. The manager looked her over, saw the belly and said, "We don't hire people with complications." She nodded and left. The lowest moment came outside a convenience store. She asked the cashier if she could clean the sidewalk for a bottle of water. He laughed and turned away. She sat by the curb, pressed her palms to the cold concrete and whispered, "I'll find a way." And somehow, she still believed she could. That belief broke one rainy afternoon, when someone stole the last of her clothes while she washed her face in a public restroom. That night, soaked, cold and aching, she curled up under an awning and stared at the passing cars. No one looked at her. No one even slowed down. And she still thought she could fix it all. The rain didn't stop for 3 days. By the third night, Grace had stopped checking the time. Her shoes were gone, stolen when she dozed off beside a heater vent near the back of a church. Her socks were torn and soaked through. The cold bit deep into her bones, but the worst part was the dampness clinging to her skin like shame. She was 7.5 months pregnant. Each night, she pressed her back against the bricks of whatever alley or covered entryway she could find. Hands curled around her belly, whispering lullabies she barely remembered from childhood. Somewhere over the rainbow, she hummed, voice cracking, eyes swollen. Bluebirds fly. No one offered help anymore. At the shelter lines, they'd say, "Sorry, full tonight." On the sidewalks, people stepped around her as if she were a trash bag left out of place. And in a way, she started to believe she was. One morning, she stood outside a bakery just as they were tossing out unsold muffins. A teenage worker looked at her belly, hesitated, then dropped 2 into a bag and slid it across the pavement without saying a word. She thanked him anyway. That night, she sat on a bench downtown, nursing crumbs from the paper bag, when a man in a dark coat brushed past. He was in a hurry, talking into his phone, distracted. Something fell from under his arm. A leather envelope, thick, heavy, the kind of thing business people held like it meant something. Grace froze. She looked at it, then at him, already half a block away. No one else noticed. She picked it up. Inside, a passport, keys, a corporate ID badge, a folded contract and $500 bills. Her breath caught. For a full minute, all she did was stare. That money could get her a room, food, clean clothes. It could get her out of the cold. Her hands trembled. Then a name on the ID, Daniel Whitmore, CEO, Whitmore Foundation for Social Equity. She had no idea what that meant. But her mother's voice echoed loud and clear. "If it ain't yours, baby, it'll never bless you." Grace stood up. It took her an hour to find the building, a skyscraper made of glass and silence. The security guard looked at her like she'd wandered in from another world. "I found this," she said, offering the envelope. "I think it's important." A woman in a black blazer appeared moments later, took the envelope quickly, nodded without smiling. "Thank you. We'll let Mr. Whitmore know." That was it. No one asked her name. No one offered her a seat. She left the building and walked until her legs gave out. That night, curled up in a corner behind a closed gas station, Grace whispered to her belly, "I did the right thing, okay? Even if it was stupid, even if no one cares." She wiped tears with the corner of her sleeve. Her face was red from the wind. Her body ached in places she didn't have names for. She thought of her mother, of the cafe that would never exist, of Logan, of the baby she hadn't even held yet. And in that darkness, she believed, truly, that no one would ever come for her. That night, she thought no one would come ever again. And you, have you ever done the right thing? Even when no one was watching, even when it hurt? Share your story in the comments. Sometimes, the smallest act of honesty can echo louder than we imagine. Maybe your story is exactly what someone else needs to hear today. 3 days passed. Grace didn't expect anything. She returned to her usual bench near the library steps, the one with the broken armrest that no one else wanted. She didn't beg. She didn't even look up anymore, just sat, belly growing heavier, hunger gnawing like an animal in her chest. Around noon, a silver SUV pulled up to the curb. She didn't notice it at first, but the window rolled down. A woman leaned out, maybe early 30s, wearing scrubs, curly hair pulled back, kind eyes. "Are you Grace?" Grace blinked. No one had said her name in weeks. "Yes," she answered slowly, voice hoarse. The woman smiled and handed her a warm takeout box. "There's a note inside," she said. "It's from someone who says you did something kind." Before Grace could speak, the car drove off. She opened the box. Rice, grilled chicken, vegetables, fresh, hot, and tucked beside the napkin, a small folded piece of paper. "You don't know me, but you gave my father his life back." That envelope held more than papers. It held the contract to fund over 100 families through our food programs this winter. You could have taken it. No one would have blamed you. "Thank you for choosing differently, Ethan." Grace read it twice. The wind still howled. Her body still ached. Her future was still unknown. But her name was on that box. Someone had seen her. Someone remembered. She hadn't been invisible after all. That night, as she sat wrapped in a thin blanket, slowly eating the warm meal, she didn't cry. She just breathed deeply, for the first time in weeks. She didn't know what this meant, if it meant anything, but she wanted to try again, even if it failed, even if it didn't last. She wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, something could still grow from the wreckage. She didn't know if it would work, but for the first time, she wanted to try. The address was handwritten on the back of the note: Whitmore Community Kitchen. Ask for Monica. Grace hesitated for a day and a half before going. The building was small but clean, tucked between a laundromat and an auto parts store. A faded sign out front read, Whitmore Foundation Meals. All are welcome. Inside, the smell of garlic and tomato sauce filled the air. Not the scent of charity, but of care. She clutched her belly and stepped in. A woman in a red apron turned toward her, eyes curious but not cold. "Can I help you?" Grace handed her the note. Monica read it, nodded once, then smiled. "We don't pay much, but you'll get meals and a place to stay upstairs. We can always use more hands." Grace blinked, unsure. I'm not a chef. I've just cleaned, and I'm pregnant." Monica laughed gently. "Then you'll fit right in. Half the women here are rebuilding something." Her room was small, just a bed, a sink, and a window, but it was dry, safe. The first week, Grace washed dishes and prepped vegetables, quiet, fast, invisible. She watched how Monica stirred sauce, how others chopped with rhythm and purpose. She memorized every smell, every motion. At night, she dreamt of ovens and warmth instead of wind and silence. One evening, Monica offered her a taste of the soup she'd helped prep. Grace took a bite, then whispered, "Too much cumin." Monica raised an eyebrow. "You've got a sharp tongue for someone who hasn't cooked." "I read a lot of cookbooks," Grace mumbled. Monica smiled. "Maybe next time you write the recipe." Each morning, Grace woke up with two thoughts. "I'm safe now. It won't last." She tried to believe she deserved this new beginning, but doubt clung to her ribs like old bruises. She still walked quietly, still flinched when people raised their voice, still folded towels with perfect edges, afraid someone would say it wasn't enough. And above all, she kept her story to herself. No one knew about Logan, or the academy, or how she'd spent the last month sleeping on concrete, especially not when she learned who Daniel Whitmore really was. The leather envelope man, the same Daniel who founded the community kitchen, the man who once passed her like she was nothing because he didn't know. Now she scrubbed his pots and helped feed the people he claimed to protect. It was almost poetic, almost insulting. One night, long after the last meal was served, Grace found herself alone in the kitchen. The prep table was clear, the fridge full. Her hands moved on instinct. She began cooking, roasted carrots, honey glaze, simple, clean. She plated it quietly and left it on the staff table. The next morning, it was gone. That night, she cooked again. A volunteer named Reuben found the plate and took a bite. "Who made this?" he called. No one answered. He stood there, nodding slowly. "This tastes like someone still believes in something." Grace froze behind the pantry door. She wanted to cry, but then the phone rang. Monica picked it up, listened, turned to the kitchen. "Grace," she said, eyes wide. "Mr. Whitmore wants to see you, upstairs, now." Grace stood outside the office door, her palms damp, heart pounding. The last time she'd seen Daniel Whitmore, he hadn't even looked at her. Now he was asking for her, by name. She knocked. "Come in," came a calm voice. Daniel sat behind a modest desk. No suit, no tie, just a grey sweater and tired eyes. Next to him sat a young man, early 20s, with gentle features and warm curiosity in his gaze. "This is my son, Ethan," Daniel said. "He's the one who tracked you down." Ethan smiled. "We owe you more than we can say." Grace blinked, unsure what to do. She stood straight, hands folded in front of her belly. Daniel continued, "That envelope you returned, it wasn't just personal documents. It held a contract for a $2 million grant, the kind of money that feeds hundreds through our programs." He paused. "We'd never have known it was missing in time, if not for you." Grace shifted her weight. "I didn't do it for anything," she said. "I just couldn't keep it. That's all." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. "And that's exactly why we'd like you to represent us." Grace blinked. "What?" "We're hosting a benefit dinner," Ethan explained. "Big donors, press, everything. Normally we'd hire a chef from the Foundation Network, but one of the volunteers tasted your cooking last night." Grace's face flushed. Daniel chuckled. "Word travels fast in a kitchen. We want you to cook the opening dish," Ethan said. "Something that tells your story." Grace's throat tightened. "I'm not a chef," she whispered. "I wash dishes, I haven't even—" "You survived," Daniel interrupted gently. "You chose integrity when the world gave you every reason not to. That's more than most professionals can say." Grace stared at them both. Her hands shook. Her mind screamed, "Run!" But somewhere, buried deep, her mother's voice whispered, "You were born for more than hiding." She nodded once. "I'll do it." The night of the benefit, she stood in the kitchen in borrowed whites, her hands steady over a stove. Her dish was simple. Rosemary chicken, her mother's favorite, sweet potato puree with cinnamon, roasted beets thinly sliced. She poured every ounce of memory, pain, and love into the plate. As the servers carried it out, she didn't hide. She stood near the door and watched. People smiled, closed their eyes while tasting. Some clapped. Ethan came back, grinning. "They love it." Grace felt her chest rise. And then Daniel stepped forward, publicly, at the microphone. "I'd like to thank the one person in this room who reminded me that character still exists when no one's watching. Grace Miller, would you stand?" The crowd turned. Grace rose slowly, and for the first time in months, she was standing tall, seen, whole, no longer the girl on the sidewalk. Grace didn't go back to the streets. She didn't go back to hiding either. In the weeks that followed the benefit dinner, her life began to shift, not with grand gestures, but with steady, quiet choices. She took a full-time position at the Whitmore Community Kitchen, not just in prep, but in training. Daniel offered to cover her culinary school tuition, no strings attached. She accepted, but she also asked for something else. "I want to teach other girls," she told him, "young mums, runaways, anyone who's been made to feel small." He agreed without hesitation. So every Thursday morning, Grace stood in front of a tiny class of women who had been told they didn't belong. She showed them how to chop onions without crying, how to measure salt by instinct, and, more importantly, how to trust their own hands again. She still had a long way to go. She was still healing, still growing, but she had her own room now, her own schedule. A little crib waiting in the corner for a baby boy, due in less than a month. And every night, before she closed her eyes, she whispered to him, "We're gonna be okay. Mama's got you." She'd learned something simple, something her mother always tried to teach. Honesty doesn't fill your stomach, but it feeds your soul. And sometimes, when the world least expects it, it changes everything. Maybe you've been there too. Maybe you've been the one doing the right thing when no one noticed. Maybe you gave something, or forgave someone, or held on when it would have been easier to let go. And maybe no one ever thanked you. But what if your quiet courage changed more than you think? Tell me your story in the comments, because someone out there might need to hear it today, to believe that honesty, dignity, and kindness still matter. And if this story touched you, leave a like. If you believe in second chances, hit subscribe. There are so many more stories waiting to be told, some maybe just like yours.